On the 25th of November 2024, Conor McGregor, internationally recognised UFC fighter and controversial news magnate, has been told by a civil jury in Ireland to pay Nikita Hand, a recent victim of sexual harassment by Conor, €250,000 as compensation, as it was deemed likely for him to be engaging in such behaviour. Conor is currently appealing the verdict, though I have a feeling that won't go anywhere. In other related news, every company that was associated with Conor over the past week has cut ties with him. Supermarkets in the UK are no longer selling a specific whiskey he advertises for, and I think owns. But, more pertinent to this channel however, is that IO Interactive also decided to cut all ties with him. Quote, "In light of the recent court ruling regarding Conor McGregor, IO Interactive has made the decision to cease its collaboration with the athlete, effective immediately. We take this matter very seriously and cannot ignore its implications. Consequently, we will be removing all content featuring Mr. McGregor from our storefront starting today." I'm not sure why it took a civil rape case in Ireland from a guy who is notorious for getting into the press to finally get your attention, IO, especially considering how much of a risk he was being put into the game to begin with, but hey, everyone learns in their own time. This was a decision that, in my personal opinion, was a long time coming. I made my distaste for Conor McGregor in this DLC quite clear a few months back, and I can't say I didn't see an incident like this coming. As of right now, the Disruptor pack is now delisted on all platforms, and the elusive target run that was ongoing has been canned early. On that note, I have a strong suspicion the devs were capitalising on the case this past month. The timing between release of the rerun and the case that was about to start is far too much of a coincidence in my opinion, not to mention it was also kept off the main roadmap. I can't prove it, but it wouldn't surprise me as the civil rape case was going to be talked about in the news. It doesn't take a genius to work out that money could be made, especially during a content drought. I do have to say, however, that the statement that was given by the company sort of gives off an air of not admitting fault. The wording of their Twitter statement is carefully constructed to deflect blame solely onto Conor and not onto them, as if they were not in the wrong for hiring a controversy magnet to begin with. That should have had an apology attached, however performative that may have been. So, where do we go from here? Well, while Combat Glue, one of 3 PR people for Hitman, has confirmed the DLC is still playable to those who already owned it before being delisted, it now has the side effect of making the unlockable safe house cosmetics and weapons from that DLC unobtainable now for anyone who didn't buy it beforehand, which is now the new problem they'll have to deal with. Personally, I'm fine with them remodeling the items to still be fighter themed, but losing all the iconography relating to Mr. Greg's. It'd still be thematic and hopefully won't make people too upset. Best of a bad situation and all that. Ditto for the mission, which I also believe needs to be reworked, even if it just means doing the bare minimum and reusing an old face from a previous mission. It's not like you weren't doing that anyway here. As well as contacting Derek Hagan or Matthew Gravel or whoever else you have on VA Retainer to voice the new replacement target for that mission. Of course, the idea of replacing elements because of a controversial figure can be seen as at least a little bit controversial in and of itself, as replacing the Disruptor, remodeling associated items could be seen as changing the record and unnecessary censorship, bowing to the current news. There are even players throwing around the tag game preservation, as if that means anything these days. Not because I don't dislike game preservation, I'm all for it. The sooner IOI gets off their arse to make a better offline mode with scoring, the better. No, the meaning of that sentence has become so nebulous that any change to a game is a threat to the sanctity of the game being preserved. The wonderful thing about games released on Steam is that depots of games are preserved and can be downloaded by the end user. That means people can re-add the mission via modding if they so desire. We already have level replacements in the Hitman modding scene, so it's not like we're not prepared either. Hell, with modding we can make it less linear, so fighting the replacement isn't as incentivized, as it currently feels less like a mission and more of a celebrity spotlight the more I think about it. Regardless of what you think, IO are now caught between a rock and a hard place, and no matter what they do, not everyone will be happy. I can imagine hardcore fans of Conor who played this game are furious, as are people who just don't follow the news and see this as unnecessary. I'm biased, as I've always disliked this DLC and mission because Conor taints it with his presence. Even when recording footage a few days back, it felt wrong to do so. So imagine what a victim of sexual harassment, rape or abuse would feel like if they were to play this mission now, or happen to see it on sale. This idea that people are not affected by events like this should not be ignored, be they mentally scarring or physically injuring. People seem to forget this, but reality is not as clean as any of us would like. It's messy, and events that happen on this mortal coil do affect fiction land, for good or ill. And besides, IO being in the middle of the spotlight when it comes to featuring a known abuser, and to repeat what I said months ago, a guy who has a red flag posted on every paragraph of their Wikipedia page, it's just bad for business, and not reacting makes the company look much worse, as if they're apathetic to the situation. There's a very good reason media companies overcorrect when something like this happens. Distancing yourself from the guilty party is not only a show of solidarity on the side of the victims, but it also means that the abuser gets blacklisted or shamed out of their profession. I'm reminded of the recent fiasco of Jonathan Majors. He was set to play a character known as He Who Remains, something hyped up as a massive, multiversal threat in later entries of the MCU. He'd already played them, in fact, in Loki and Ant-Man 3, and then news came to light about Majors assaulting his ex-girlfriend late last year. Marvel, or rather Disney, had to essentially backpedal on their plans and work around him while he got fired from that project and several others, and blacklisted from the industry. Nobody works with him anymore. And this behaviour for IO is not a slippery slope to worse things. Removing a present-day asshat that became a bit too risky for IO to support is not going to make them change how they handle future DLCs. There is nothing to suggest that, and it is just scaremongering and outright dismissal of the present-day situation so a player can play their game guilt-free. As a final note to end on, I want to make sure that IOI understands the gravity of the situation. What you did by adding Connor to the game was wrong. Like, it was a monumentally poor decision on your part to promote him. Either you knew of his controversies and ignored them for the sakes of profit and brand expansion, or you did not know and didn't bother to check, which is probably worse as that implies your company has no safeguards. Having more eyes on the game is fine. Having celebrity cameos is also something I'm alright. But opening up your game to any celebrity is a very bad image for your company to have, as if to say, we'll hire anyone famous to be in our game, we won't do any checks, and we'll disavow anything bad that might happen. It is truly fascinating how much you missed the mark here. And through it all, you still have not apologised for your behaviour. Connor may be the one in the wrong overall, and Nikita the one that is the real victim here, but IO's flagrant flaunting of player care cannot and should not be swept under the rug. Own your mistake instead of deflecting onto someone easy to blame. I highly recommend changing your practices for hiring celebrities and, to be safe, voice actors, and making it more strict, i.e. do an actual background check going forward. I feel like saying that is so obvious and problematic for me to do, but here we are. If you can, please donate the revenue from that DLC, and really the deal with Connor, to a relevant charity dealing with sexual harassment, if nothing else but as a gesture of goodwill on behalf of the company. It'd go a long way. The idea of Connor as a target should not have even left the ideas room of IOI Copenhagen. But this is what reality is like. Messy, complicated, and not everyone gets the memo in time. Normal programming will resume next week. Goodbye.